My name is Callum Mercer, 29 years old. I walked into my mother's birthday party carrying a velvet box and a kind of hope that felt like thin glass. The backyard was dressed like a magazine, fairy lights tangled in the pines, a quartet making everything sound more expensive than it was, servers ferrying canapes that left cilantro on your teeth. The gift table glittered with ribbon and performance. I kept my fingers on the velvet lid to steady myself, the way you keep a hand on a railing when you don't trust the stairs. 2 years earlier, none of this would have scared me. I was the event planner who made chaos look choreographed. Salt Lake City hotels knew my clipboard by name. I met Ethan at a charity gala I'd built from a spreadsheet into a miracle. He stood behind a tasting station, a freelance chef with forearms dusted in flour and a quiet, amused attention, like he'd been listening to me longer than we'd spoken. He wrote his number on a cocktail napkin and tucked it into my palm like a dare. We were jokes and jazz, late-night leftovers on the floor, and the kind of kindness that doesn't need a spotlight. My parents, Jeffrey and Susan, preferred men with corner offices and glossy assurances. They didn't say it. They let questions do the bruising. So, catering. What's your 5-year plan? My sister Lindsay, all angles and curated taste, called Ethan fun, the way people say temporary. I could live with their tight smiles until I couldn't. The person who taught me not to flinch was my grandfather, a carpenter who built a construction firm one splinter at a time. When I was 12, we made a birdhouse in his workshop. He guided my thumb along the saw's teeth and said, "Every cut is a promise. Make the ones you can live with." He added, in that gruff way of his, that when I started a family, he'd left me something to make standing up a little less lonely. He wouldn't say what. He liked stories that made you earn the last page. By the time Ethan knelt on the cracked tile of his apartment kitchen, one knee, one silver ring he'd saved months for, every part of me said yes. We kept it small, ours. I told no one. Then, one morning, 2 lines bloomed on a pregnancy test, like I'd watered something true, and it decided to grow. Ethan held me like a promise with a heartbeat. We weren't ready to give that to the wolves. The first crack in the past appeared under cafe lights. I ran into Mr. Harold Grayson, my grandfather's lawyer, a man whose suits always looked like they had better places to be. His eyes softened. "Calla, may I speak plainly?" We sat. He folded his hands like a ledger closing. "Your grandfather established a trust, $1 million, triggered when you have a child. Your parents have been its stewards." He paused, watching me understand. "Stewards shouldn't siphon. Not 500,000. The word siphon slid across the table like oil. "I don't bring this lightly, but you're starting a family. You deserve clarity." He offered copies, dates, memos, a foggy paper trail that nonetheless spelled out a shape. I left with his card and a feeling like I had swallowed a key. That night I opened my top drawer and took out my grandfather's ring. Thin gold, warm as a memory. I set it in a velvet box and wrote a note with the kind of neatness you use for truth. "I know about the trust, 1,000,000. And the $500,000 you've already taken. I didn't yet know what I would do with the box. I only knew I needed to be able to put my hand on something that felt like the last page he meant me to earn." Back at the party, my mother was in deep blue, smile lacquered, taking credit for the moon. Jeffrey stood near the bar, the kind of tall that knows it, laughing with men who button jackets when he speaks. Lindsay slid in and kissed the air near my cheek. Her perfume said winter fruit and control. Ethan's hand found mine. "We can leave," he murmured. "We can drink cheap champagne at home and make a better playlist." I shook my head. "One announcement," I said. "Then we're free." When the quartet paused between songs, I stepped onto the little platform where the band leader stood and lifted my glass. The room did that thing where it hushes even when it doesn't want to. "I have an announcement," I said, voice steady enough to surprise me. "Ethan and I are expecting a baby." For a breath, the world was a snow globe someone forgot to shake. Then my mother's smile cracked. Lindsay's eyebrow lifted like a blade. Jeffrey stepped forward, voice cutting clean through the air. "A child with that man," he said, letting the words hang like a charge. "You're dead to me, and out of the will." Silence doesn't always mean nothing is happening. Sometimes it's 1,000 tiny calculations rearranging the room. I could feel the eyes, the smothered gasps, the glasses held half to mouths, the quartet's violist daring not to breathe. Ethan's hand tightened. I didn't plead or perform. I walked to the gift table, set down the velvet box, and said the 3 softest words I own, "Happy birthday, Mom." I found my coat on the back of a chair, the lining smooth against my shaking arms. The night air bit when we stepped outside, a cold so honest it felt like kindness. My phone started immediately, the wildfire of calls, texts blooming in frantic loops. Calla pickup. This is a misunderstanding. We can fix this. Come back. I watched the screen and thought about ledgers and saw teeth, about promises you can live with. I answered once. My father's voice came through, already modulated toward reason. You'll regret this. We need to talk. Too late, I said, and hung up. We drove into a city that didn't care what had been said under pines and chandelier light. Ethan kept one hand on the wheel and one on my knee, thumb tracing a quiet circle like a lighthouse. In the glove compartment, my spare keys rattled with each turn, a small, private percussion reminding me of what I could lock, what I could open, what I could keep. Somewhere behind us, a velvet lid would be lifted, and a ring would catch the fairy lights like a signal. Paper would unfold, numbers would become a story, and for once I wasn't afraid of who would read it. By the time we got home that night, the city had gone quiet. Salt Lake in its midnight hush, streetlights painting silver bars across our apartment floor. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face turning red, my mother's hand frozen mid-toast, the velvet box sitting among ribbons and wine glasses like a ticking clock. Ethan tried to make tea, but the kettle's whistle felt too loud. They'll come around, he said gently. No, I whispered. They'll come after. And they did. By morning, my phone was a battlefield. Missed calls stacked on missed calls. A voicemail from Mom, her tone caught between tremor and command. Calla, this is your mother. We need to talk immediately. It's not what you think. Then Dad's message, brittle with anger. You've made a huge mistake. Don't destroy this family over lies. Then Lindsay's text, blunt and cruel. Hope your little stunt was worth it. I didn't answer. I just opened my laptop, created a new folder, and named it Keep. Inside, I started saving everything. Screenshots, call logs, every word that proved what I already knew. When people like my parents lose control, they rewrite the story. Around noon, my best friend Kristen called. She lived 2 blocks from my parents. Her voice crackled with disbelief. I don't know what you put in that box, but Calla, you should have seen it. The party imploded after you left. My heart thudded. What happened? Your dad and Mom tore that box open in front of everyone. There was a ring and a letter. People said your mom went pale and your dad just lost it. He kept saying, how does she know? Loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I sank onto the couch, and so they read it. Oh, they read it, Kristen said. Mrs. Carter told me they were scrambling to explain it away, but no one bought it. You hit a nerve. I thanked her, voice shaky but sure. If they go public, keep your screenshots ready. Kristen exhaled. You really think they'll try that? I know them, I said. They'd burn the truth if it made them look bad. She didn't argue. By evening, I was right. My father posted a statement on a local community page. Our daughter has been manipulated by greed. There is no trust fund theft. Only lies that hurt our family. Please respect our privacy during this difficult time. Minutes later, Mom added a comment beneath it. Calla has always struggled to separate fantasy from reality. We love her, but we cannot support her behavior. And then Lindsay chimed in, a final twist of the knife. It's heartbreaking to watch someone you love lose herself over money. Dozens of comments flooded in. Sympathy for them. Suspicion toward me. Poor parents. How could she? Ungrateful child. I heard she stormed out. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then Ethan knelt in front of me, his palms on my knees. Look at me, he said. They're panicking. That means they're scared. I nodded, though my chest ached. Scared of the truth. That night, Kristen called again. The gossip's spreading, but so are the whispers. Mr. Thompson told people he saw your dad's reaction at the party. Said your mom looked guilty as sin. It's turning. Good, I said. Let them trip over their own story. Ethan brushed my hair back. You don't have to fight every battle. Yes, I do, I said. This isn't just about me anymore. He didn't argue. He knew. 3 days later, Mr. Grayson emailed me. The subject line read, Documentation, Mercer Family Trust. Inside was a scanned ledger, columns of transactions, signatures that shouldn't exist. My father's handwriting appeared beside entries labeled management fee, family expense, temporary advance. Each subtraction chipped away at the million my grandfather left. The total missing, $500,000. Grayson added a short note. They'll try to justify it as custodial oversight. It isn't. I'm ready to testify when you decide how you want to proceed. I printed every page, hole punched them, slid them into a binder, and labeled it with a strip of masking tape. Evidence. Then I placed it in the keep folder beneath my phone records and screenshots. That night, as I tucked the binder onto the shelf, Ethan watched me. What's next? I don't know, I said honestly, but I'm not running from them anymore. He crossed the room, wrapping his arms around me. Then we do it right. Paper, witnesses, proof. You don't fight fire with shouting, you fight it with facts. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, low and deliberate, like an omen arriving on cue. I glanced toward the window, imagining the scene, still unraveling at my parents' estate. The fairy lights would be dark now, but I could picture my mother standing by the glass, whispering damage control, my father pacing, fists balled around that letter. Lindsay probably refreshing her feed, gauging which way sympathy was tilting. They thought they'd buried the truth years ago under signatures and silence. But my grandfather's words came back to me, steady as a pulse. Every cut is a promise. Make the ones you can live with. I looked down at the binder, the proof, the evidence, the cut I just made, and whispered, I can live with this. The next morning, I opened a new document on my laptop. At the top, I typed one line in bold. Formal notice of claim, Mercer Family Trust. Then I saved it in the keep folder, because some promises, once carved, deserve to be finished. A month later, my daughter came into the world like sunrise after a long storm, fierce, blinding, and impossible to look away from. We named her Ava. 7 pounds, a perfect cry, her father's eyes. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and beginnings. Ethan held her first, whispering things she wouldn't remember, but that changed us anyway. You're safe, he said, over and over, like it was both a promise and a prayer. Watching him, I thought, this is what family is supposed to feel like. Not power, not control, not ledger sheets and silence. Just hands steady enough to hold what matters. For a few weeks, I almost forgot about the trust, the betrayal, the lawsuit, brewing quietly in a binder labeled Keep. Almost. But truth doesn't dissolve, it waits. 2 months postpartum, Kristen came over with coffee and bad news. They're still posting, she said, setting her phone on the counter. The screen glowed with my mother's words. Our daughter continues to spread false accusations for attention. Please pray for her recovery. Below that, my father's addition. We've forgiven her lies privately, but she refuses to accept help. A dozen of their old friends had liked the post. Lindsay had shared it. Kristen looked at me carefully. You can't let them own the narrative. I exhaled slowly. I'm done playing PR for people who treat me like a scandal. That afternoon, I called Mr. Grayson and asked for a referral. He gave me one name, Barbara Clean. She's sharp, he said. No patience for theatrics. Exactly what you'll need. Barbara's office sat high above downtown. Glass walls, city reflection slicing through the blinds. She was in her 50s, all silver bracelets and precision. The kind of woman who didn't waste adjectives. I've read your file, she said, flipping through my binder like a metronome. Your parents managed the trust illegally. $500,000 is missing. I can get it back. I blinked. That simple? She smiled without warmth. Simple is not easy, but the law is on your side. Ethan sat beside me, Ava asleep in his arms. What will it cost? He asked. Some money, she said, but mostly courage. People like your parents. They count on exhaustion. They expect you to fold before discovery begins. She slid a document across the table. Sign the retainer. I'll handle the rest. My hand hovered over the pen. Barbara, suing your own family. It feels like lighting a match in your own house. Her gaze didn't soften. They set the fire, Ms. Mercer. You're just naming the smoke. I signed. The days that followed blurred into baby feedings and legal prep. Barbara was methodical. Subpoena requests, document audits, chain of custody filings. My father's voice began echoing in my voicemail again. Fury painted as reason. You don't want this fight, Calla. You're embarrassing yourself. You'll regret it when your daughter sees what you've done to us. I saved every message. Each one went into the keep folder. Then one evening, my mother called from a blocked number. I answered before I could stop myself. "Calla," she said quietly, "your father's temper got ahead of him. We only took what we needed to keep the business afloat." "You stole from a baby," I said. "From our family," she corrected. "It was temporary. We meant to put it back." "Then do it now," I said. Her breath caught. "Don't do this. You're a mother now. You'll understand someday." "No," I said. "That's exactly why I can't let it go." She started to say my name again, but I hung up. I'd spent years mistaking control for love. I wasn't doing that to Ava. When Barbara filed the official complaint, the papers landed on my parents' doorstep like thunder. By dinner, my father had called Barbara's office, leaving a message so venomous she had it transcribed. "Suing your family over a misunderstanding," he'd said. "She's sick, greedy. She's tearing us apart." Barbara called me afterward, her tone dry. He also called me a vulture, which frankly I've been called worse. "What did you say?" I asked. "I said the vulture's client is winning." That night, Ethan wrapped his arms around me as I stared at the city lights from our apartment window. "You did the right thing," he murmured. "I feel like I'm pulling apart the last thread of my family." He shook his head. "They cut it years ago. You're just acknowledging it." Ava stirred in her crib, soft sounds filling the space. I watched her tiny chest rise and fall and thought of my grandfather, the smell of sawdust, the warmth of his hand guiding mine over wood grain. He'd said, "When you start your own family, the gift will be there when you need it most." Maybe this was it. Not just the money, but the permission to fight for what's rightfully mine. 2 weeks later, Barbara sent me a copy of the summons served to my parents. The official seal gleamed at the top like a crown and a warning. I printed it, slid it into the keep folder, and tucked it under the binder. Outside, thunder rolled again. Same sound as the night I first decided to stop being quiet. I checked on Ava one more time before bed. She slept with her tiny hand curled near her face, fingers twitching like she was already reaching for something. "Don't worry," I whispered. "We're keeping what's ours." Because in my family, truth had always been treated like a loan, and I was done paying interest. 9 months after the night I left that party, I walked into the courthouse carrying a diaper bag and a folder that could end my parents' reputation. The Salt Lake City courthouse was all marble and echoes, the kind of place that forced you to hear your own heartbeat. Barbara walked beside me, calm and crisp and gray, heels striking the floor like punctuation. Ethan trailed a step behind, carrying Ava's carrier. "She'll nap through the fireworks," he whispered, trying to smile. "I hope so," I said, "because I won't." Inside the courtroom, Jeffrey and Susan sat at the defendant's table, dressed like apology sculptures. My father's suit was too dark for mourning. My mother's pearls trembled each time she swallowed. Lindsay sat behind them, her eyes darting anywhere but mine. When the judge entered, everyone rose, and the scrape of chairs sounded like old ghosts clearing their throats. Barbara started slow, deliberate. She spoke of the trust, of my grandfather's intent, a fund of $1 million, activated when his granddaughter began her own family. She held up Mr. Grayson's affidavit, his signature like a nail sealing a coffin. Then came the bank statements. Each one was a scar, withdrawals labeled management fees, consulting expenses, temporary loans. Dates lined up like a timeline of betrayal. Barbara's voice never wavered. Over $500,000 diverted without authorization. My father's lawyer stammered through rebuttals, talk of miscommunication, of good faith management. But when Barbara projected an email onto the screen, one from my father to the trustee reading, "Will repay," when she's too distracted with the baby to notice, the courtroom went still. Even the judge leaned forward. My mother closed her eyes. Lindsay bit her lips so hard it drew blood. Barbara let the silence hang, then spoke the sentence that changed everything. "Your Honor, they weren't protecting a legacy. They were spending one." When the judge delivered her ruling, her tone was colder than law books. "Mr. and Mrs. Mercer, you will return the $500,000 in full, plus damages and attorney's fees." She paused. "And regarding the defamatory posts against your daughter, those will remain public as evidence of malice. You may wish to issue an apology before the court considers additional action." Jeffrey's composure cracked then, a flash of rage behind the man who'd built his life on control. Susan reached for his hand, but he pulled it away. I didn't look at them when the gavel struck. I looked at Ava, asleep in her carrier, the soft rise of her chest, the tiny tuft of hair curling at her temple. This was who I'd done it for. By the time we stepped outside, the courthouse steps were flooded with light and whispers. Reporters hadn't been allowed in, but word had traveled. Neighbors who'd once posted hearts under my mother's photos were already sharing the verdict link. Kristen called before we reached the car. "It's everywhere," she said. "The judgment's public record. People are sharing the documents. It's Calla, it's justice." That night, screenshots flooded my inbox. They stole from their own daughter? Always thought they were too perfect. Guess we know where the money for those charity galas came from. I didn't feel triumph, just the quiet, unfamiliar piece of oxygen returning to a room. A week later, a letter arrived in a pale blue envelope. No return address, but I knew Lindsay's handwriting. Tight, slanted, trying too hard to look graceful. "Calla, I'm sorry. I didn't know about the money. I shouldn't have believed them. Please let me meet Ava. I miss you. L." I read it 3 times, then folded it neatly back into the envelope. Ethan watched me from the kitchen. "You going to reply?" "I don't know," I said. Sorry is easy when there's an audience. He dried his hands on a towel. "Maybe you need to hear her out. Closure doesn't always look like forgiveness." So the next day, I agreed to meet her. We met at a small cafe downtown. Lindsay arrived looking smaller than I remembered, hair unbrushed, sunglasses too big for her face. When she saw Ava asleep in the stroller, her eyes softened. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "She is," I said. "What did you want to say, Lindsay?" Her voice cracked. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have taken their side. I thought you were exaggerating, but after the trial, after everything, I see what they did. I just want to be her aunt. Please." I sipped my coffee slowly, buying time. "You watched them tear me apart online. You joined them. And now that it's inconvenient, you want back in." "I didn't know how bad it was," she murmured. I was scared. I nodded. So was I, but I showed up anyway. Her eyes filled. "I'll prove it, however long it takes." I wanted to believe her, but Ava stirred, and I remembered every message, every sneer. "You can start," I said finally, "by being honest. With yourself, not me." I left cash on the table and stood. "Ava's nap's almost over. I should go." Lindsay reached out as if to touch my arm, but stopped short. "You really won't forgive me?" I looked at her then, not as a sister, but as a mirror of everything I used to excuse. Forgiveness isn't the same as access. Her shoulders sagged, but she didn't argue. Outside, the air smelled like rain about to fall. I stood for a moment, letting it touch my face. A week later, Barbara called. "The transfer cleared," she said. "Full repayment plus damages. You're whole again, Ms. Mercer." But she was wrong. I wasn't the same kind of whole. I was something new, stitched back together with boundaries instead of longing. That evening, as Ava slept, a courier knocked on our door. A small package, no return name, just Mr. Grayson's office seal. Inside, a single envelope rested on cream stationery. My grandfather's handwriting, unmistakable even through age tremors. "Calla, if you're reading this, you've found the gift. Money fades. Integrity doesn't. You will be tested by those who love control more than truth. Choose courage over comfort. And when you hold your child, remember, you are the legacy, not the fund. Granddad." The letter trembled in my hands. Ethan read it over my shoulder, his voice low. He knew. "Yes," I said. "He always did." Outside, thunder rolled again, softer this time, less warning, more closure. I folded the letter, placed it in the keep folder, and whispered to Ava's sleeping form, "We're done being small." A year later, the smell of cinnamon rolls filled the kitchen, the kind Ethan baked on slow Sundays, when the world felt finally safe. The morning sun poured through wide windows of a 2-story brick house we'd bought in the quiet hills outside Salt Lake. On the counter sat a photo of my grandfather holding me at 5, sawdust still in his hair. Beside it, a smaller frame, Ava, 1-year-old, frosting smeared across her grin. The house wasn't extravagant, but it was ours. No ghosts, no strings. The mortgage papers had both our names, and the key hung on a hook by the door, a key I touched every morning as if to remind myself how far I'd come. Ethan's restaurant, Brooks Table, had opened 3 months earlier downtown. Every review called it authentic, unpretentious, heart on a plate. I sat in the back corner most evenings, nursing coffee while watching him cook in the open kitchen, movements sure, sleeves rolled, laughter louder than the clatter of dishes. He'd glance at me sometimes and wink, and I'd remember how my father once said chefs didn't build futures. I smiled every time, thinking, no, but this one did. My career bloomed too. The event planning firm promoted me to senior manager. The same social circles that had once whispered about me now hired me to make their galas run. Irony has a long memory. One afternoon, Kristen stopped by with flowers and the latest gossip. "Your parents have gone radio silent," she said, settling onto my couch. "They resigned from 2 charity boards. Lindsay moved back in with them. Apparently the phone calls don't stop. Bill collectors, reporters, the works." I didn't gloat. I just stirred sugar into my tea. "Consequences aren't cruelty," I said. Kristen raised a brow. "You're handling this very saintly." "Not saintly," I said softly. "Just done." That night, after we put Ava to bed, I finally opened the top drawer of my desk, the one labeled Keep. Inside were the documents that told the whole story, the bank statements, the court ruling, my grandfather's final letter. I reread his words, "Choose courage over comfort." For a long moment, I just sat there, tracing the faded ink with my thumb. Then I closed the folder and slid it back into the drawer. Some truths don't need guarding anymore. They just need resting. The next day, I took Ava downtown to visit Ethan at the restaurant. She toddled between the tables, tiny sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Regulars waved. One older woman leaned over and said, "She looks just like you." "She's better," I replied. When we got home, a car was parked across the street. Black sedan, engine running. My stomach clenched until the window rolled down and I saw her. My mother. Her hair had gone gray at the temples, her makeup understated. She didn't get out. She just looked at me, eyes tired, mouth uncertain. For a moment, time folded. I was at that birthday party again, the air thick with champagne and humiliation. Then the vision broke, replaced by this quiet woman who looked like the aftermath of her own storm. I walked halfway across the lawn and stopped. She rolled the window down another inch. "You look well," she said, voice trembling. "I am." Her eyes darted to Ava in my arms. "She's beautiful." "She is." Silence stretched, a bridge neither of us trusted enough to cross. Finally, she said, "Your father's been different. He doesn't leave the house much." I nodded but didn't answer. "I'm sorry," she said then, barely audible. "For all of it." Maybe once I dreamed of hearing those words. Now, they just floated in the air, heavy and too late. "I hope you find peace," I said quietly. She gave a small nod, put the car in gear, and drove away. Ava tugged at my hair. "Mama?" "It's okay," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "Just a ghost." That night, I framed my grandfather's letter and hung it above my desk. Beneath it, I placed the ring, the one that had started it all, in a glass case. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Legacy isn't inheritance. It's how you rebuild after being broken. When Ethan came home, flowers still dusting his forearms, he found me there, staring at the letter. He slipped his arms around my waist. "Still thinking about them?" "About him," I said. "Granddad, how he knew exactly what would happen." Ethan smiled into my hair. "He knew who you were going to be." Outside, the porch light flickered on automatically. Ava's laughter drifted down the hall. I turned, pressing my forehead against Ethan's. "We made it." He nodded. "We did." Later, after dinner, we sat on the porch, watching fireflies blink across the yard. The city lights shimmered far off, quiet and distant. Ava toddled between us, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. For once, I didn't feel the need to prove anything, to them, to anyone. My grandfather's promise had been more than money. It had been a map, away from control, toward courage. I glanced back at this house, the walls we built, the laughter inside, the life we'd chosen, and whispered to the night, "This is the gift." And for the first time in years, there was no thunder waiting to answer.